Am I audible behind to everyone? Yes. Thank you very much for coming today. Let us begin with a short invocation for guiding us towards wisdom and light. So you can try to repeat this after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the all-pervading ultimate reality may it guide us towards light and wisdom. Thank you for coming today, and I'll speak on this topic of mindfulness in three broad parts. First, I'll try to explain what the mind is. Then I'll talk about why the mind works the way it works. Third part will talk about how we can make the mind work for us instead of against us. My personal experience of the reality and the gravity of the mind happened when I was studying engineering about 25 years ago. So I was doing an experiment in the lab, and a friend suddenly called out, "Hey, there's wildlife on your body." And then I looked, and there was some small insect on my shirt. So he was about to smash it. He said, "Don't hurt it." I called out to him, and I picked up the insect and gently put it on the floor. And I distinctly noted that my friend's eyes had widened, and he was looking at me curiously. A few hours later, I was in the hostel mess, and we were sitting, and he spoke something to me which infuriated me. And I just got so angry that I raised my fist. I said, "I'll kill you." Of course, it was completely non-literal, but when I raised my fist and raised my voice like that, again, I suddenly noticed that his eyes opened wide. And when his eyes opened wide like that, I was just reminded of that incident that happened just a few hours ago. And it was as if I was observing myself from above. And I started thinking, wait a minute. Who is this person that I am observing? Is this a person who doesn't want to hurt even an ant? Or is this the person who is about to smash his close friend? So that was the time I started thinking, what is going on? What is going on inside us? There are two kinds of people in the world. Some people are wise and some are otherwise. So, and it's not just that there are two kinds of people within the world. We'll find that we ourselves are sometimes wise and sometimes otherwise. Now, especially when we have to give advice to others, we are sometimes ourselves amazed at the gems of wisdom that come from our mouth. But then when we are provoked or agitated or we are pressured, then we are shocked at the way we behave. Who is this person? So why is this oscillation there within us? Are there multiple people living inside us? What is going on? So this happened in my second year of engineering. I was always a reader of books, but from that time I started reading books more on psychology and philosophy. And that is how I was introduced to the Bhagavad Gita. And while reading the Bhagavad Gita, both the context and the content struck me very much. The context of the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna and Arjuna are on a chariot, and Arjuna is about to fight the biggest war of his life. So we could say that there are two armies, and in between the two armies, Krishna and Arjuna come. So here there is, so Krishna tells Arjuna, Krishna and Arjuna, they come right in the middle. And here they have the discussion of the Gita. So to give a contemporary analogy for this, Imagine there is, say, the World Cup cricket final, and India Pakistan are playing, and the toss has been done. India's top batting team has come to open, and the striker is there in strike. The field has been set up. The bowler is about to start the run up. There are thousands of people in the stadium. Millions are watching, and suddenly, at that time, the striker calls the non-striker. They both come in the middle of the pitch, and both of them start talking, and they keep talking, and they keep talking. Everyone will become restless. What's happening? What is so urgent that you need to talk right now? This is the time for action. So, Krishna and Arjuna coming in the middle of the battlefield, Senayoru Bhayor Madhye Ratham Sthapayame Achyuta. They come in the middle of the battlefield, and Arjuna and Krishna, they start talking. So, what is it that is so urgent? Actually, if these two players are talking right in the middle of the game, middle of the pitch, and before the game starts, that means there must be something very urgent. Maybe one of the players is a new player and is having a nervous breakdown, and the other person is trying to calm that person down. So there is something going on inside. See here, connecting the first incident that I mentioned with the second incident, but the Gita's context. See, when something is expected to be done, and at that time a person does something completely unexpected, the externals are set for a particular action, and at that time the person does something completely different or opposite. The probable reason for that is something unexpected has happened inside. That externally everything is set for the cricket match. If suddenly somebody wants to have a discussion, that means internally something has gone wrong. So similarly with Arjuna on the battlefield, what happens is the Gita's context is demonstrating the power of the inner world, and a prominent element in our inner world is our mind. So Arjuna is a warrior, he is about to fight the biggest war of his life, and just before that he is overwhelmed by his mind. His mind gets confused, his mind gets not just confused but confounded, and he just can't move forward. And while the Gita talks many things, it has many subjects, one of the central themes it addresses is the theme of the mind. And so from the context, the Gita is very much about the mind, that a warrior who was almost undefeatable in fighting was nearly defeated not by any external force but by some internal factor inside. And the internal factor, the Gita will later explain, is the mind. And with respect to the content of the Gita, especially in the 6th chapter, but throughout, the mind is a central element in the Gita's teachings. So, with this broad understanding, let's try to look at what is the mind. Now, when we want to consider, I said I am talking various topics, so the first topic I am going to talk is the mind. So, if we consider contemporary intellectual history, so the notion of the mind has gone through two extremes. First was, the mind is just non-existent. There is no such thing as a mind. We have a very rigidly physicalist view of the self, and there is the body, and in the body there is the brain, and there is no such thing as the mind. So there are behavioral researchers, behavioral scientists like B.F. Skinner, and they said that what is inside doesn't matter. Human beings are simply defined by their response to stimuli. So there was one school of thought which rejected the mind completely. The mind is non-existent or irrelevant. Now, as a reaction to that, if you consider a pendulum, if you take the pendulum to one side, as soon as there is a little release, it will go to the other side. So in much of the contemporary world, the mind is sometimes treated as if it is omnipotent. There are many self-help books like The Secret, which say that if you just think of something, you will get it. That now, yes, the mind does play a role, But to make it omnipotent is to actually put us in ourselves in illusion. What happens when you just think positive, everything will be positive in your life? Well, not really. No matter how positive we may be, we are all going to say grow old. The people may say age is just a function of the mind. Well, yes and no. Yes, if I constantly thinking I am growing old, that's not healthy. But the body at the age of 60 and the age of 40 and the age of 20 is not the same. So, these two extremes, one is considering the mind to be unreal and the other is to consider the mind to be the only reality. If you think positive, everything will be positive in your life. And there are psychologists who have done research how this idea of positivity can actually cause negativity. Why? Because if you are told you think positive, positive things will happen in your life. And then if positive things don't happen in your life, what happens is that the people are told, oh, you're not thinking positively enough. And so what happens is people feel guilty about not being positive. So what happens is in trying to be too positive, we end up having negative about ourselves. So the Gita offers us a balanced vision of reality. And this is we'll talk about this as a model of the self, which the Gita talks about. And it says that there are 3 levels of reality. So there is the body, which corresponds to the physical level of reality. There is the mind, which is at the mental level of reality. And beyond that, there is the Atma, the soul, the self. That is the spiritual level of reality. And it's significant that the Gita says all 3 are real. So the physical level of reality matters. But the physical level of reality is not all that matters. The mental level of reality also matters and the spiritual level also matters. So one metaphor to understand this 3-level reality could be a computer system. In that we have the hardware, then we have the software, and then we have the user. So we can say that the hardware is like the body, the software is like the mind, and the user is the self. In modern society, we have had an extraordinary improvement of the hardware. The hardware has been phenomenally improved. Today we have, by primarily the results of science and technology, we have at our fingertips facilities, comforts that were unimaginable even for royalty a few decades ago, or definitely 100 years ago. We have airplanes, we have telecommunications, we have air conditioning, we have so many facilities. So the level of improvement at the physical level is dramatic. And yet, ironically or even tragically, we see a significant decline at the level of the software. We see that mental health problems are alarmingly increasing. Stress, depression, anxiety, addiction, suicidal urges, even suicides. All these are increasing enormously. So, why is this happening? Because one level, now so mental health problems are a very complex phenomena and I won't go into all of them. But what has happened is that our progress has been lopsided. And while we improved the physical level of reality, we haven't paid much attention to any of the other levels of reality. And the Gita setting demonstrates that even when the physical level of reality is very conducive, but if the inner reality is not aligned properly, then there can be not just a problem, but there can be desolation, devastation. So let's try to understand this 3 level of reality. So I'm still talking about the first point. So the mind. Sorry, what is the mind? So in the model of the self that the Gita offers us, we could say that this 3 level reality we could understand in another way over here. So there is the soul, there is the mind, and there is the body. So, in this, what the Gita explains is that from the soul comes the light of consciousness. Consciousness, which in Sanskrit is called as Chaitanya. Now, Chaitanya or consciousness, if you consider the soul to be like a battery, a flashlight, then within that flashlight, so if this is the flashlight, this is like the Atma. And if I have a pathway through which that light is coming out, the light coming out is the consciousness, and the pathway through which that light comes out is the mind. So, with respect to this, the soul is the root of consciousness, and the mind is the route of consciousness. And then here we will have the brain. So, quite often consciousness is associated with the brain, and yes, there is definitely an association between the brain and consciousness. However, this association is more of correlation than it's correlation, it is not causation. So, researchers have found, just to illustrate the difference between these 2 points, researchers have found that people with bigger hands have better vocabularies. Now, maybe say, what have big hands got to do with big vocabulary, isn't it? The two seem unconnected. Actually, they are connected, but it is not a causal connection. How is it? It is not that bigger hand lead to bigger vocabulary. Rather, people who have bigger hands are bigger people. People with smaller hands are small children. So, children have small vocabularies, adults have better vocabularies. So, between bigger hands and better vocabularies, there is a connection, but the connection is, it is not causation. One is not causing the other, it is correlation. So, similarly, yes, there is a connection between the brain states and our experiences. So, when we are happy, the dopamine and certain other chemicals are secreted in the brain. But those are not the cause of happiness, they are the correlates of happiness. Just like when we are happy, we smile. So, smile is associated with happiness. But if we all want to be happy, can we just get a machine that we just put the machine on our face and that machine will twist our facial muscles into a nice smile? And if we just put that machine on our face, our facial muscles get twisted to smile, we are happy. Will that be happiness? No, that is very superficial. Sometimes we go to some company and there is a secretary, and the secretary uses what is called a secretarial smile. It's a polite smile, but there is no real emotion involved in it. So, a smile is correlated with happiness. A smile is not the cause of happiness. Similarly, the brain states. The brain plays a very important role in the manifestation of consciousness. But the brain is not the source of consciousness. Like the mind, the brain is also a route to consciousness. The consciousness comes from the Atma. So, let's take this as a model. So, the mind basically is the channel through which consciousness comes to the world around us. Now, with this understanding, if we take this as a functional model, let us try to make sense of the mental health challenges that we face. So, the mind is basically meant to be like a window through which we can see the outer world. I was in California at a friend's place and we were sitting in a big house, and there is a big window from which we could see the beautiful Californian mountains. And we were chatting, and as I was chatting and looking at the scenery, suddenly I saw a huge ape just appearing from the mountains and charging towards the place where we were staying. And this was like you might have seen the apes in the Planet of the Apes kind of movies, giant ape. And as it started charging, I became a little concerned. And he kept racing straight towards the window, raising his hands as if to smash through the window and come in. I looked at my friend in concern and he was grinning. I looked at him again and then I saw that he had something in his hand which looked like a remote. And I looked quizzically at him and this ape was just charging, about to smash the window. And at that time he just clicked. He pressed a click and that ape disappeared. Hey, what did you do? I asked him. What was it, all this? So he told me that he had got some latest technology by which the window could double as a TV screen. So when it was functioning as a window, it would show the outer world. And just by pressing one button, that same window would become a TV screen. And just to have fun at the expense of his guests, he had created a small video clipping which showed an animated ape in the same background that you could see with the window. So now what happened was, he knew that it was not a window, it was a TV screen. So he was grinning. I didn't know that it was no longer a window but a TV screen. So I was alarmed. So for us, this is what happens with our mind. The mind is meant to function as a window, but at any moment it can turn into a TV screen. When it turns into a TV screen, it can start its own movie over there. And if we are not alert, we will start thinking that what is being shown on that movie screen is actually the reality. And we will react accordingly. So with this broad understanding, let's try to, the mind can double as a window as well as a TV screen. Now why does it act as a TV screen? Because, going back to this model over here, I'll just put this separately. There is the soul and then there is the mind. So if you consider, there is the soul over here, there is the mind over here, and there is the body at the physical level of reality over here. So now within the mind there are various kinds of impressions. Impressions, in Sanskrit the word is used for the samskaras. So samskara generally used in the positive sense. There are we perform some ceremonies for children as they are growing up. So the samskaras. But samskara, it basically creates a scar, a mark on our inner world. Some marks can be positive, some marks can be negative, but these are there inside. And when some information is coming in, it doesn't just come unfiltered to us. What happens is that information comes through the filter of the impressions. And because it comes through the filter of the impressions, that information gets distorted. Like we say often that if we are wearing rose tinted glasses, we will see everything of rose color. So like that we all have certain conceptions, certain biases, certain cravings. Based on that, we will see reality accordingly. So now so there are three possibilities. One is the external information just comes in unfiltered. This is extremely rare. Most often the information comes filtered, the second thing. But there is a third possibility. Something might come in from here without any external trigger at all. That means, generally speaking, we see something, then we remember something, and that's what triggers the thoughts inside us. But sometimes, even without an external trigger, just suddenly some thought might pop up and we get consumed by that. So when this is happening, so I talked about this. So when some impression is coming only from inside the mind to us, that's when it is acting as a TV screen. So the external world is almost shut out at that time. When the external world is coming in, that's when it is acting as a window. And most of the times it is acting as in between. So we are getting some perception, but the perception is distorted. So with this understanding, let's look at two major mental health problems. We'll look at one and then that will help us to understand second also. Let's consider that broadly the two major mental health problems that are there in today's world is anxiety and depression. Now, there could be various causes of all of these, and we can go into that, but let us try to understand it from not from a sociological perspective, as a psychological perspective. So generally fear is associated with the future. So if we consider, this is the past, this is the present, and this is the future. So coming back to this model again, we have the soul, the mind and the body. So normally we get some information from here and we perceive, and then this goes all the way to the spirit. The spirit is the inner observer. Like on a phone, some notification comes and then we notice it, we are the user. So we are aware of things in the present. I was at a conference on spirituality and mental health in Connecticut in America, and there were people from various faith traditions who were sharing their experiences about how they faced mental health problems and how they dealt with it, what happened. So there was one young woman, she was telling how she ended up, she went to her office one day, and when she went to the office, she suddenly saw a strange look in her boss's eyes. Just that strange look triggered a thought in her. Oh, is my boss upset with me? Am I going to be fired? She said, am I going to be fired? Oh, if I am fired, what will happen? I have got so much student loan. How will I pay it? I will be disgraced. What will people think about me? How will I get a new job? There is a recession right now. I won't get a job. Oh, then I will be jobless. Then if I can't pay the mortgage for my house, then I'll be homeless. What will happen to me? How will I live? And just thinking like that, she got completely overwhelmed. And she had almost like a nervous breakdown. So now, what exactly happened over here? So in terms of this model, if I consider, the soul is still here. There is this three things, the past, present and future. So past, present, future. So what happens is, when there is fear, the body is here, but the mind goes here. So what happens is, the soul's consciousness is meant to go over here, but the soul's consciousness gets consumed over here. So this doesn't happen and this starts happening. Not that this is desirable, and not the tick doesn't indicate it's desirable, thing is indicating this is what happens. So it's like the TV screen. What is it doing? It has just moved and it started showing a movie. But this is a horror movie about the future. And now when this happens, it's extremely dangerous, depending on how horrible the movie turns out to be and how much we get consumed by that movie. Now at one level there was no problem. Later on she said, she went and talked with the boss. The boss said that, actually I had a difficult morning at my home. My teenage child was not listening to me. I was upset because of that. So it had nothing to do with her. But so some stimuli from the present can cause the mind to start a movie. One trigger and the mind goes into a movie and it just gets completely consumed. So in one sense, the mental and the physical realities are going apart. And when the mind starts having this anxiety about the future, that's when we end up with paranoia, with panic, with extreme anxiety. Conversely, if the mind goes into the past, it goes into the past and remembers, it starts a tragic movie about all the bad things that have happened to us. Oh, I tried to pass this exam and that didn't work. I was in this relationship and that person left me, and I tried to do this and that backfired. As the mind starts going to that tragic movie, we end up feeling that nothing will work in my life. Nothing is worth working at all. And that's how we end up with depression. So when the mind goes here into the future, we have anxiety. If the mind goes to the past and it gets consumed in the past, that's what causes depression. So depression is caused not just by one negative event happening in my life right now, But that one negative event triggers memories of many, many negative events that have happened in the past. And that makes me completely paralyzed. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, something similar happened to Arjuna. He was observing the battlefield and he suddenly thought, no, if we fight, there will be so many people killed and society will be devastated, our dynasty will be destroyed. Is this fighting worth it? I don't know, I don't think it's worth it. I can't decide. So if I can't decide, I can't fight. So his mind went to the future. Significantly, Arjuna, although there was fear, there was no fear of his own safety. Not once does he tell you that I am afraid of my own death. He was more afraid of making a wrong choice, a choice which would have disastrous consequences. But essentially, what happened was his mind spun out of control. So now the mind, so this, I am discussing the second part now. Why does the mind work the way it does? That is because we all have certain impressions within our mind. And those impressions combine with outer perceptions in unpredictable ways. So, to go back over here, the soul, mind and the body, and now beyond the body there is the physical reality, the external world. So, from here we are getting the perceptions. From here we are getting the impressions. And these two, they combine together in an extremely unpredictable way. So when these two combine, how exactly they combine we don't know. And that is why each of us, we have a mind that tends to behave in a particular way. So some of us may be more vulnerable to fear, some of us may be more vulnerable to jealousy, some of us may be more vulnerable to anger. So why do these things happen? Because the same stimuli from outside will trigger different impressions based on what are there present inside us. And when those stimulations, those impressions get triggered, then we get consumed by that kind of emotion, that kind of thoughts, that kind of experiences. So what can we do about this? This is the third part of the talk now. Why does the mind work the way it is? Because it combines impressions and perceptions in unpredictable ways. So what can we do about it? Two things. Now we try to regulate our perceptions and we try to regulate our impressions, essentially. Let us try to understand what we mean by this. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks Krishna, the mind is so wild, I can't function. So Krishna tells, yeah, it is difficult. Asamshayam mahabhav. Undoubtedly the mind is very difficult. But he says two things. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha gruhyate. He says by practice and by detachment. I will explain what this practice and detachment mean. So the mind has certain impressions inside us. We can't change them immediately. And we live in a particular world. All of you are students, some of you are faculty. You are living in a particular situation right now. We can't change the situation much. However, what we can do is select the kind of perceptions that we allow to enter inside us. And then we also select the kind of impressions that we nurture inside us. I'll explain what this means. So now if you have come for this talk, now while sitting in this talk, some of you could sit right near the door and anybody who comes inside the door, from the door, notice that person. Now, yeah, if that's your interest, that's what you will do. But then that will distract you from focusing on the talk over here. You sit in a place which is away from the door, where you can see the speaker, where the audio you can hear clearly, you can see things clearly, then you are able to focus. So we can't change the perceptions that the world offers us, but we can select which perceptions we receive more. And this external regulation is regulation. This regulation is extremely important. And this is something which is almost universally acknowledged even in modern psychology. Psychology says the best way to deal with temptation is to not deal with temptation. That is not the only way, the best way. The easiest non-confrontational ways, say if I want to study and I keep getting notifications on my phone, then maybe for the 1 hour I want to study, just put the phone in airplane mode. Just cut off distractions. So this regulation plays a significant role. So regulation at the level of perceptions can be there, where we create some filters so that we can focus on what we want to do. So these are, we could say, self-created filters or boundaries. So if we find that we are vulnerable to particular kinds of negative emotions, if somebody is very vulnerable to fear, then certainly they should not be watching horror movies. And that's just common sense. So whatever be our vulnerability of our mind, we guard ourselves so that those perceptions don't come too much. Now we can't remove them entirely. We live in a world where negativity will come in, but we can minimize it. Now that's important, but the second thing which is important, how do we have regulation with respect to the impressions? For this, I would like to give some thought about the word thought. So I will use the word thought in 2 sentences, and maybe some of you can tell me what is the difference, is there any difference between two? I just got a thought. I have given this a lot of thought. Is there a difference? Can you even say what is the difference? I just got a thought. I have given this a lot of thought.
First one just appeared like a bubble.
Yes, first is where something appeared automatically, and the other is? The other is where we give conscious attention. Thank you. So if you consider the software example, the first idea of thought is almost like a mental pop-up. So on our phone, suddenly some notification pops up. So thought can refer to a mental pop-up, but thought can also refer to sustained deliberation. I think about an issue and think about it systematically. So combining these 2 meanings of the word thought, we can say not every thought deserves our thought. Not everything that pops up inside us needs to be thought about. It's like not every notification that comes on our phone needs to be noticed. There's some notification, just swipe it away. So like that, there will be many thoughts that pop up in our mind. So just because fear or anger or jealousy or depression or whatever kind of thoughts are coming in my mind, that doesn't mean that I have to let them grow. I don't have to pay attention to them. So how does this, going back to the example of the window and the TV screen, how does the window change to a TV screen? It's not entirely automatic. It's acting as a window, at that time some pop-up comes up. So like this, going back to that incident of the employee, of that young woman, she was in her office and she was observing and she saw her boss. At that time the mind was more or less acting like a window. But when she saw that strange look in her boss's eyes, what happened is that there's like a pop-up over there. Hey, maybe I'll be fired. And then you click that pop-up. You click that pop-up, then the movie starts. And once the movie starts growing, it starts consumes the full screen, and then it consumes us completely. So what do we need to do? We need to become a little more self-observant. So going back to the starting incident which I mentioned about my life. So where first I was not wanting to hurt an ant, but now I was about to hit my friend. So what happened was, that second incident somehow triggered an observation. Hey, what am I doing? And then that triggered that observation, that triggered that question, and then started thinking about it. So basically, from us when the pop-ups come up. Some pop-ups need to be noticed, some pop-ups need to be neglected. So if we understand this point that certain pop-ups will come inside us. If we have a tendency to fear or anger or insecurity or whatever, those pop-ups will come up. And we may not be able to eliminate those pop-ups. But that does not mean that we have to let that pop-up become the movie that consumes us. We can redirect our focus elsewhere. So, Abhyasa and Vairagya, what Krishna is talking about, from this perspective, let's try to understand what it means. That Abhyasa, if we consider the mind to be like a child, some of you are parents, many of you will become parents in future. So, in parenting, there are two primary aspects. If you want to take care of a child, there is feeding. Feeding means providing the child nourishing food items and in general providing nourishment, and the other is fencing. Fencing means we create a fence. We tell the child, no, don't go out of the house alone. Don't take food from strangers. We create boundaries. And in that way, so the fences protect, the fencing protects, the feeding nourishes, the feeding empowers. So we can say what Krishna is talking about as in the Bhagavad Gita as an approach to managing our mind, to becoming more mindful, is essentially to these two things. So feeding is abhyasa and fencing is vairagya. What it means is, in the outer world as well as in the inner world, there are certain stimuli that are constructive, that are helpful. So we nourish those. We focus on what is good for us and we nourish those. And in the outer world, there are stimuli that are agitating, that are troubling. Consider our friend circle or our social circle. Some people, they are friends, we look forward to be with them, we spend time with them, we feel energized, we feel rejuvenated with them. Some people, when we meet them, it's like as soon as they come, they seem to suck our energy away. It's like they are almost like moving radiators of negativity. So, if we know such people, then if somebody is constantly going to discourage us, then keep a distance from them. Somebody is constantly going to play games with our mind, create fear within us, manipulate us by fear, then keep a distance from them. Vairagya. That which is harmful for us, as much as we can understand it, keep it away from us. It's said that there are two kinds of people. Some people bring happiness wherever they go, and some bring happiness whenever they go. So, if we understand that these sources are positive for me, these sources are negative for me. So, we are not just talking here about positive thinking, we are talking about more of positive living, positive choosing. Choosing positive, constructive, healthy stimuli and avoiding negative, destructive, unhealthy stimuli. And similarly, in our inner world, we choose the stimuli that, the impressions that pop up within us, some of them can be good. It's not that all the impressions are bad, just like notifications that come on our phone, some of them can be important. So we learn to observe ourselves. And this is where, when we learn to observe ourselves, we can find, we can choose the positive stimuli, avoid the negative stimuli. And how do we do abhyas and vairagya? It is at one level just by using our self-observation and intelligence to understand what is favorable and unfavorable. But beyond that, this can be done, the Bhagavad Gita says, by the practice of yoga. So now the word yoga has many different meanings. But the primary meaning of the word yoga is connection. Yoga is cognate with the word yoke. Yoke means two things get connected like a yoke. So connection, and it's not just like two parts which are riveted together. It's a connection that is more of a harmony. So when there is a harmonious connection between two parts, that is yoga. So now the Gita talks about various systems of yoga, and we will not go into all those systems right now, but we'll just talk about how this principle can be applied for our mind management. So, let us put it the same model, now let us put it vertically. There is the soul, there is the mind, and there is the body. So, for us, at the level of the mind and at the level of the body, sometimes some very powerful waves may come, and those waves can sweep us away. That means what? At the physical level, suddenly some things can go wrong. We are having a good job and suddenly we are fired. We think we are in a healthy relationship and suddenly, we get SMS, I don't want to be with you, break up. At the physical level, devastating things can happen. It's like a wave, a giant wave that comes and sweeps us away. And similarly, at the mental level also. Now, of course, the physical level reality can trigger a mental wave, but sometimes the mental wave, at the mental level, a wave can come even without any physical cause. Like some people just suddenly start feeling panicky, suddenly start feeling depressed. What caused it? It's difficult to figure out. Now, when these waves come, now we can't fight against waves. And this is where I'll conclude with this point. I started people say, think positive. Well, sometimes life is so negative. It's just cruel to tell a person a lot of negative things are happening in their life to be positive. It's not so easy at that time. So sometimes just terrible things happen in life. At that time, when there is like a giant wave which has come and swept us away. So what do we do at that time? That is the time when it's like if I'm in an ocean, no matter how strong I am, I can't fight against a wave. A small wave I can fight, but a giant wave, we can't fight against it. So what do we need? We need something like an anchor, something firm that we can hold on to. And if we have something firm to hold on to, even then effort will be required. But the effort required to hold on to something strong and the success from that is far more than the effort required to just, or the success coming from trying to stop the wave. So similarly, sometimes at the physical level or at the mental level, we may be swept away. So what do? At the spiritual level, we need to connect with the S is the soul, SS is the super soul, the ultimate reality. And this link is the essence of yoga. Yoga can refer to physical postures, and that's definitely there. But those physical postures are ultimately meant to yogasana, we go towards samadhi. And samadhi is the connection of the finite consciousness with the infinite consciousness, of the soul with the super soul. So this is the anchor. And to the extent we strengthen this anchor, or rather we strengthen our hold to the anchor, what will happen is the waves at the level of the body or at the level of mind, they will not disturb us so much. That means some horror movie may start at the level of the mind, but if we are turning around and we are holding on through the practice of yoga, we are holding on to a higher reality, then we will not get caught in that movie. And if we don't maximize that pop-up, it won't consume us. So yoga practice is meant to, it automatically will make us more mindful. Here mindful means we become aware of what our mind is doing, what our emotions are, what our situations are. What yoga practice does is, it helps us rise above our situations and rise above our emotions. Yes, they are coming. This is a bad situation and there is negative emotions coming within me. But I am different from these. To the extent I understand I am different from these, then I can observe them. They will come, they will stay, they will go. Nothing at the physical level, no negative situation stays forever. When we had the pandemic, it was a very difficult situation, but it ended. At our mind level, we may have spells of fear, of anger, they will come, they will go. To the extent we can hold on to something higher, to that extent we will be not shaken, not battered by the waves at the physical level. So, this yoga practice is what the Gita recommends repeatedly when it talks about divine remembrance, when it talks about remembering the divine. So, in the Bhagavad Gita's yoga tradition, it recommends, one of the things it recommends is meditation. Meditation is not just deep thinking, taking a deep breath and calming down, yes, but meditation is also thinking about the higher reality, the highest reality. In the tradition that I am a part of, we use mantras for meditating. So, mantras are sound vibrations which are attuned to higher realities, and that they help us build that connection. They aid us in connecting the soul with the super soul, and in that way we can strengthen our grip on the anchor and learn to be less affected by the mind's ups and downs. And if we can become more mindful. It's amazing what all we can achieve. All of us, we have probably experienced that our mind has worked against us. We all can think of times when we have sabotaged ourselves. Now, even with a part of us working against us, we all have achieved some things in life. All of you are in on the top institutes in India, if not the world. So, even with our mind working against us, we have achieved so much. If our mind stopped working against us, if instead our mind started working with us, how much more can we achieve? How much more good we can do in the world? People often dream of being adventurers. Think, okay, I'll climb Mount Everest, I'll do this, I will do that, yes, there can be many adventures in life, but there can be no adventure as meaningful, as empowering, as discovering how much good we can do if we make our mind our friend. So, how much good? Who knows? That can be the greatest adventure and the greatest discovery of our life. So, I'll summarize. I spoke 3 points today. I started by talking about what is the mind. So, mind is the link between spiritual level of reality and the physical level of reality, and explained how the mind is the route, the channel through which consciousness comes from the soul and it goes to the outer world. So, the mind acts like a window for us to perceive the outer world. But then the second part I discussed was the working of the mind. So, how it works is, it's meant to work as a window, but it can work as a TV screen. So, when that happens, it can distract or even damage or destroy us. So, we talked about anxiety. Essentially, the mind, instead of linking with the present, it starts linking with the future, an imagined future. It starts a horror movie which consumes us. Like I saw that ape on that window turned TV screen. So, like that we all can get consumed. And for us, when we perceive reality, it's an unpredictable combination of outer perceptions and inner impressions. That's why same situations can affect different people differently. So, what can we do? How can we get the mind to work for us? I talked about 2 broad things. That is, that we can't change what is inside us, we can't change what is outside us also much. We can eventually, but not immediately. So, what do? Is we regulate. So, feeding and fencing, abhyas and vairagya. That means we focus on taking in the positive stimuli, those which are helpful for us from the outer world, and keeping a distance from, say, people who are toxic, from situations that prey on our vulnerabilities. And similarly, with respect to our inner world, we try to become more of an observer. I talked about 2 meanings of the word thought. Not every thought deserves our thought. Many things will pop up inside us. Don't get agitated just because some fear or jealousy or anger is popping. Yeah, it will come, it will stay, it will go. So, Abhyasa means feeding. Focus, nourish the healthy stimuli, whether they are coming from outer perceptions or from the inner impressions, and restrain, regulate the negative stimuli. And to do this, to do Abhyasa and Vairagya more effectively, one tool that the Gita offers us is the tool of yoga. That rather than simply focusing on the body and mind and selecting what is good, what is bad, sometimes some impressions or situations may just come like a stormy wave. And we may not even be able to perceive what is happening, or even if we perceive, we will not be able to restrain it. So what we can do is, we can find an anchor and hold on to it. So yoga offers us the anchor by which we can connect with the ultimate reality. And there may be changes at the physical level or the mental level, but if we are linked with the unchanging reality, then that will give us some stability, and then we can process the changes and ensure that we don't react unhealthily to them. We can choose a constructive response. So meditation, mantra-aided meditation, can help us establish that yogic connection. And if we can establish that connection and we can make our mind our friend, then discovering how much good we can do can be the greatest adventure of our life. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments?
You can raise hand for questions. Mic will come.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. So I just wanted to ask one thing, that you will be mentioning about stopping or what you can say, just move away from some vulnerabilities we have. So if we are moving away from vulnerabilities, are we going uphill in that sense?
Okay, good question. So, if we are moving away from our vulnerabilities, are we growing by that? So
if growth means...
Okay, I understand your question. You know, there are two differences. There's a different thing over here. There's a difference between walking away and running away. The two are not equal. The two are different. What is the difference? When we walk away from a particular situation, we have somewhere else we want to go to. When we are running away, our focus is, I just don't want to be here. Where I go doesn't matter. So when I am talking about avoiding, say, stimuli that we are vulnerable to, I am talking more in terms of walking away, focusing on that which is important for us. So suppose in our social circle, like I said, we have somebody who always is being negative with us. They devalue us, they mock us, they deride us. Then, and if that person is not a very important person in our social circle, maybe that's not our boss, not our colleague, then we don't have to spend too much time with them. So there are situations where avoidance is the safest thing. But the nature of the world is that we won't be able to avoid. There will be difficult people whom we have to deal with, and dealing with them will require us to grow. So growth is important, and growth comes by facing difficulties. But it is not that all difficulties lead to growth. It is not that anybody lifts any kind of weight is going to develop strong muscles. You need to know, okay, which muscles are weak, which muscle needs to develop, what kind of weight do I need to lift. Then we will develop strength. So let's put this in another way. If we look at our life broadly, now there are different kinds of, let's start with people, but that same applies to situations. See, there are people who association gives us strength, and there are people being with whom takes away our strength. And sometimes working will require us to work with the second category of people also. However, if this becomes much more than this, that means if you are constantly with people, being with whom is just exhausting, it's draining, it's burdening, then we will collapse. We need to make sure that we also have the association of some people with whom we get strength, and then that rejuvenates us. then we can deal with the people who require strength. Similarly with respect to our activities. There are some activities which give us strength, some activities take strength. So if our responsibilities may require us to do any activity that take away our strength. But we need to make time for the activities that give us strength. If we don't do that, we may do some activities now, but eventually will collapse. So fatigue, breakdown, all these happen when we do too many activities that require strength and too little of the activities that give strength. So we all need to find a balance. A healthy balance will be where it's at least slightly tilted in this direction, where there is more activity that give me strength than they take strength. Or if in some phases I have to do some activities that take away a lot of strength, after that I make time to do the activity that gives strength. That's why we need breaks. We need breaks where we rejuvenate ourselves. So meditation, spirituality, spiritual program, these can be breaks for us. If there is no break, then what we will have is a breakdown. So breaks can help us to avoid breakdown. So we have to choose our battles. We can't avoid battles entirely, but we need to choose our battles. That was the point I was making. Hope that is clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question behind? Okay.
Such a wonderful talk. So I have a question like we are all conscious at the level of mind body. So for getting connected to the super soul, we should first have a realization that we have a soul. So how do we have that realization that so that we can hold on to the soul that when the strong waves are coming at the mind and body level, how can we hold on to that? So how do we have this realization that we have a soul?
Okay. How can we have the realization that we have a soul? Well, it is at one level through analysis itself. Analysis, we can understand that we can sometimes observe our emotions. We can sense, okay, I am getting angry right now. So, if I were my emotions, how could I observe my emotions? See, I am not my feelings, I am the feeler of my feelings. If we consider at one level, every night when we dream, our body is at one place, but we are experiencing something else. So that itself indicates that our identity is not our body, that our identity extends beyond our physicality. Our body is not determining our experience. So just some thought reflection like that can help us recognize that our core identity extends beyond our body and even our mind. We could do a simple thought experiment for this. You can, wherever you are sitting, you can just sit comfortably and close your eyes. And take 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. Now, with your eyes closed, try to look right in front of you. Because your eyes are closed, you can't see whatever is in front of you. Still, there is as if some kind of screen inside you. And on that screen, you may be seeing various things. You may see your home, maybe see a loved one, maybe you see some image of this room where you are in. Maybe you just see a dull haze of colors. Whatever it is that you see on some kind of screen inside you. While you are observing that screen, try to take a step back and catch sight of who it is that is observing that screen. There is a screen, there is a seer of the screen. So try to step back and catch sight of the seer of that screen. Sorry, that just disrupted that. Okay. So when you try to catch sight of the seer, no matter how many steps you take back, the seer steps back with you. What you are looking for is what you are looking with. So, that inner screen is your mind, and that inner seer is you. You can take one deep breath and then slowly you can open your eyes. So now as you open your eyes, what is happening is the outer scene is there. The outer scene is coming on the inner screen. And then on the inner screen, what is there? You as the inner seer are seeing it. So these three things, the scene, the screen and the seer. A little reflection can help us understand these three realities. The scene is the body, physical level of reality, the body. The screen is the mind, and the seer is the soul. So by a little reflection, we can ourselves get a sense of this. And over a period of time, as we do spiritual practices, we will ourselves start experiencing that our mind may be disturbed, our body may be exhausted, but still we experience some kind of indescribable calm and indescribable strength. And that will give us a greater understanding that actually the core of my experience, the core of me as an experiencer is not determined by the mind or the body. There is something beyond it. Okay, thank you. You had a question, sir? Come ahead.
Yes, maybe I don't need the mic.
Sure. Please say it, no problem.
Oh, it's okay. Very enlightening.
Thank you. Happy to hear.
I was wondering whether the spiritual truths or realizations, should they be subjected to scrutiny of the scientific method as well?
Okay, thank you. It's a good question. Should spiritual truths be subjected to the scrutiny of the scientific method? Certainly, there is a rational inquiry, and that is very much a part of the broad spiritual tradition of India. The Vedanta Sutra begins with Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Jigyasa is inquiry. So, inquire about the nature of reality. Brahma can refer to the general ultimate reality. The Bhagavad Gita itself is a set of questions being asked and these questions being answered. And in the Gita, although within the tradition Krishna is considered to be God, but Krishna is not even once in the Gita using his godhood to thrust a particular message down Arjuna's throat. Krishna is actually rationally answering Arjuna's questions. So the use of intelligence, the use of the rational faculty is very much a part of the Vedic tradition or the broad Indic tradition of wisdom. Having said that, if we consider science, the scientific scrutiny to be rational inquiry, then definitely rational inquiry should be there. However, scientific scrutiny goes beyond just rational inquiry. It means something more. At the dawn of science, so Galileo was probably the first person who talked about this, but others also. What they did was they divided our observed reality into what was called as primary qualities and secondary qualities. So the secondary qualities, primary and secondary. Now what are the criteria for deciding what is primary and what is secondary? It is primarily, to use the word primary again, measurable. That which was measurable was considered primary. That which was non-measurable was considered secondary. So for example, length, breadth, velocity, viscosity, luminosity, all these are measurable parameters. And science consciously chose to focus on these primary parameters. Now, are there secondary parameters? There are many. Say consider love. Now, if we ask anyone, does your mother love you? Most people say, what kind of question is that? Yeah, of course my mother loves me. Now, can you scientifically prove that your mother loves you? Well, yeah, that's a different branch of knowledge. Nowadays relationships are so unpredictable and so difficult. Now you say, if a boy proposes to a girl, marry me. The girl would like to know, does he really care for me or not? Does he really love me? Now, if we had something like a love-o-meter, you put it on the boy's heart, do you really love me? Let's see what the meter says. Now, love is a very important reality for all of us. But can it be mathematically measured? We can measure some brain chemicals, but those are not love. So, leave alone spiritual realities, even other realities that are a part of our lived experience, we cannot really measure them so easily. Say, medical science is one aspect of it is to deal with pain, but there is no medical meter for quantifiably measuring pain. If somebody has a fracture, how much pain does the person have? The doctor may say you are recovering. The patient says, I am in terrible pain. So there is no objective criteria. You can have the objective criteria about how much the bone is damaged, say. But there is no objective criteria for quantifiably measuring pain. So there are realities which cannot be quantifiably measured. So what happens is that, going back to this earlier same level, so the spiritual level of reality, the mental level and the physical level of reality. So even within this physical level of reality, there is only a part of physical reality that is measurable. Not everything even at the physical level is measurable. So to a large extent, science focuses on this physical level of reality. Now this itself is so complex and so fascinating that understanding it, tapping its mechanisms can dramatically transform our understanding of the world, our capacity to function in the world. At the same time, we cannot use this approach for all of reality, because the mental and the spiritual levels of reality are not measurable. So does that mean that rational inquiry can't be done? No, rational inquiry can be done. But specifically, can we use the exact scientific methods? Well, not really. So we could have something like inferences. So in sciences also there are different sciences. There is basically in science there is the most reliable is the deductive method, and only math works on deductive method. Most of the science that works in our world, that works on the inductive method. We do a certain number of experiments, we make some predictions and then do further experiments to see whether they work out. But especially when science goes towards distant realities, distant in time or space, then what the method that is used is called as abductive reasoning. This has got nothing to do with kidnapping or abduction. This abductive means that it's more like an inference to best explanation. We can't repeat the events. So if we want to know how a particular area became, how the tectonic plates shifted, why there is so much a particular area is earthquake prone. Now we can't repeat the events that happened of the shifting of the tectonic plates. We can't repeat it and do it repeatedly to the experts. What we do is we look at various streams of information that we have, and then we try to come to convergent conclusions through various lines of reasoning. And by that say, okay, this caused this. Okay, why were the Himalayan plates formed? Or why did this happen like this? How did the universe come out to be like this? If we say the universe came by a particular theory, Big Bang. Now Big Bang theory, there is no inductive way, certainly no deductive way also. What we are using for that is abductive method, where we try to gain as much information about the distant past, and based on that information we try to infer. So in many ways abductive reasoning can be used. So for example, what I talked about, the idea of the soul. Now because the soul is spiritual, it's not measurable. So no matter how high definition microscopes we develop, no matter how much brain scan we do, we won't be able to find the soul. However, there can be inferences toward the existence of the soul. So, I was in Canada, I was in Toronto, and I was giving a talk over there, and I spoke about an experiment over there, and then they told me that the auditorium where I was giving the talk was actually dedicated to that very scientist. This is Dr. Wilder Penfield. He is considered the father of neurosurgery. So, he wrote a book called The Mystery of the Mind, and he did a lot of experiments. So, one of the he wanted to understand the locus of consciousness, where does it come from. So, I will repeat one of the most striking experiments from his book. So, what he did was, now we have a fairly good understanding. Okay, is it because I am moving? Okay. So, we have a fairly good understanding of how, say, bodily functions correlate with particular neural areas in the brain. So, what he did was, he observed the brain and he asked the subject, raise your hand, and then he observed which part of the brain was activated. Then he asked the subject, lower your hand, and that part of the brain got deactivated. Then he externally activated that part of the brain, and then he asked the subject, what happened? He says, my hand went up. He said, did you raise your hand? He said, no, I didn't, you did. They deactivated that part of the brain, the hand fell down. He said, what happened? He says, my hand fell down. Did you lower your hand? No, I did, you did. Now, he took this same setup, and then he, while repeating this, he also activated other parts of the brain. That means, if any other part of the brain is activated, does the subject feel that I am raising my hand? But no matter which part of the brain was activated, the subject never felt that I am raising or lowering my hand. So, what does this imply? As a metaphor, you say now this is a computer, say imagine there is a printer over here, and I press the print button on my device, and the printer's hand starts moving. Now, I sit here inactive, and you come and press the print button, and again the hand starts moving. So, the print button is simply a trigger, a tool which can activate the printing hand of the printer. But I am different from both the printing hand and the print button. So, basically what Dr. Penfield's conclusion was that this area of the brain which is correlated with the physical functioning, that is like the trigger, it's like the button. So, in the second case, Dr. Penfield was activating that button. In the first case, who was activating it? So, he did research for several decades, and he concluded that the source of consciousness is extracerebral. That the brain is like a computer, but it is programmed by something beyond itself. So, this we can say is abductive reasoning. Now, there are several other chains of thought also, several other experiments also which point to a reality beyond the brain, and so this kind of method can be used not necessarily to conclusively prove spiritual reality, but to give rational pointers towards it. So, should we scrutinize it? Yes, certainly we can, but if we expect conclusive proof of the kind we might get in mathematical experiments, in mathematical logic, we are not going to get that. That we will not get even for subtler realities that we experience in day to life, then what to speak of spiritual realities. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to hear this. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Great talk. One problem we identified in your talk was that there is the pop-ups. So, is there any means like we know about the exact root of these pop-ups, and can we have cures for these pop-ups at the very root level?
Okay, excellent question. Thank you. So, where do the pop-ups come from? Actually, in one sense, say every action that we do, it has an external consequence and an internal consequence. What does it mean? Let's say, I was once invited to Las Vegas. There was Las Vegas University to speak over there. So one of the organizers of my program worked in a casino. He was the manager because these casinos are also associated with big hotels. He was a hotel manager. So he's telling me at that time that if somebody comes to gamble, the worst thing that can happen to a gambler, if they gamble for the first time, what do you think is the worst thing that can happen? No. They win. If they lose, I don't want to lose money like this, I'll go away. But if they win, then what happens? They get hooked to it. And these casinos, they seem to be random, but there are sophisticated algorithms monitoring them. So in general, they try to find out if somebody is coming new. Often they rig it in such a way that new person wins. So what happens is that it is an external consequence, I won or I lost. But there is an internal consequence. Every action that we do, it creates an impression inside us. So that impressions that are formed as an internal consequence of our action. And this impression leads to what we can call as a proposition. Proposition means, let's do this again. So now, if we repeat the action, say if I repeat the action, then another layer of impression is formed. So the impressions that are there inside us, they are the results of the actions that we have done in the past. So now the impressions that are there inside cannot be deleted. They are already there. However, one big advantage of the mind is, or one very advantageous feature of the mind is that it is malleable. Malleable means that the impressions on it can be rewritten. And how can they be rewritten? Just by making healthier choices. So, suppose somebody why is this happening? Okay. So how does a person say become an alcoholic? Nobody is born with a bottle of alcohol in their mouth. They drink once, maybe they drink because it's social pressure, it just seems cool, let's drink. They drink once, that creates an impression. They drink again and again and again. And as those impressions become stronger, initially they may drink because they just want to hang out with the cool people. Then they start drinking because they want some relief from the stress. And then they start drinking because that is the only relief from stress that they can think of. And they keep drinking even if their drinking is not relieving them of stress but is causing them further stress. So what has happened is, as the impressions keep becoming stronger and stronger, then the propositions start becoming more and more forceful. And it's almost impossible to say no to that. So somebody who has got a particular set of impressions, they can't change them immediately. So what they can do is, they can create healthier impressions. That means, if say my only go-to when I'm stressed is drink, then in my normal times, let me try to find a healthier way to deal with my stress. Maybe let me do some deep breathing exercises, let me try to do some meditation, let me try to do some reflective reading. And maybe when that proposition comes, I can't resist it, but I'm creating new impressions. And if I just keep cultivating a positive habit, sometimes in self-transformation, we focus too much on giving up the negative habit or stopping a negative habit, stopping a negative behavior. But if the impressions are there inside, we may not be able to stop it sometimes. But even if we can't stop the negative, we can still start the positive. So just try to develop healthier methods of dealing with stress. And if you do that, over a period of time, those impressions will be created. Those impressions will lead to propositions. And if we just start meditating every day for a few minutes, start calming ourselves by that, then maybe after a few days, few weeks, when we start feeling stressed, instead of say reaching out for a bottle of liquor or reaching out for our phone and just surfing mindlessly on social media, watching some movie, from within itself that proposition will come. Let's meditate, let's do something calm, let's reflect. So that's how, by our actions chosen right now, by actions chosen consciously and repeated diligently, we can change the impressions inside us. Okay? Okay, good question. One question here. Yes, please.
Thank you for the important talk. I'm curious about like in the talk we learned about the mind, but there are other certain entities like Manu, Buddhi, Chit, Ahankar. So, what are the what is the context of all the other certain entities in the model that you illustrate?
Okay. So there are other in this model of the self, there are other entities also which are like chitta or buddhi. So what is the role of all this? Yes. So if we consider the soul, the Atma, one of its features is it is Sat, Chit, Ananda. So these are the three defining characters of the soul. Chit means it's conscious. So the faculty of conscious awareness that is there, that is innate to the soul. However, while the soul, in one sense the soul's consciousness can go here, it can go here, but at present it is going primarily here through the mind. So the soul's consciousness that comes through the mind and then through the body, this consciousness is called as chitta. So this is chit and this is chitta. So chitta you can say is embodied or conditioned consciousnness. It is embodied consciousness. So there is original consciousness which is pure. There is embodied consciousness that is filtered, that is contaminated, that is having impurities within it, various biases and conceptions. That's one thing. Now within this mechanism that we have, the soul, there is the body. So the mind can sometimes be used as a shorthand to refer to the entire linking mechanism. So that's just the subtle body. But if you want to make it a little more complicated, it's like if you go to the Panama, it's in the middle of North America, South America. Panama is both a country and Panama is also a city within that country. So like that, mind can refer to the full mechanism that links the soul with the body, and the mind. Can something be done about this? What is causing this? Okay.
Caused when mobile is near to this.
Sorry?
It's caused when the mobile is near to this.
Oh, okay. You can keep that with you then. So now this mechanism that is there inside us, we can analyze it a little further. So we could say that within this mechanism there is the intelligence and there is the mind. And the intelligence is more reflective, whereas the mind is more impulsive, it's more spontaneous. The intelligence is more cautious. So there is a faculty within us which just acts quickly. Now the acting quickly can sometimes be bad, can sometimes be good. So there's a part of us which thinks more. Thinking more can sometimes be good, it can sometimes be bad also. We can overthink situations. So we have both these resources inside us. So in general, for us, most of us, the ideal situation is where the intelligence works with the mind. These two are in harmony. They work cooperatively. But for most of the situations, the mind tends to be much stronger than the intelligence, greater than the intelligence. and then we tend to be impulsive. So, initially we may need to consciously cultivate reflectiveness, consciously cultivate caution, nourish our intelligence, and then we will know when I need to act quickly, when I need to pause and think, and then both of these faculties can work together. Okay? Thank you. Any last question before we stop? Yes, please.
Thank you for the wonderful class. So my question is that ideally soul is supposed to be in harmony with the super soul and listen to the instruction of the super soul. Prabhu, are you clear?
I am able to hear, but I think others may not be able to hear.
But it is causing some sound.
Let's see if it causes.
Yes, so ideally a soul is supposed to be in harmony with the super soul and listen to the instruction of the super soul. But when our soul is not in harmony with the super soul, so then we tend to listen to the instruction of the mind and think that is whatever the mind instructs us, that is always right. So how to differentiate between the instruction of the mind and the instruction of the super soul? That is my question.
Yes. So, from inside us, there are multiple voices that come out. So, which is the good voice, which is the bad voice? How do we differentiate? Well, it's difficult. Okay, I think we should switch it off. Just switch it off if possible. Okay. So, it's difficult. So, rather than focusing on where a voice is coming from, we focus on where the voice will take us. Now, can we know where the voice will take us? Not always, but broadly we can know. When something from within us prompts, yell at that person. Now, from our past experience, we know yelling rarely makes things better. The causes of anger are bad, but the consequences of anger are usually much worse. So, we can say that there is the inner voice. Now, we don't know where that voice is coming from, but if there are 100 situations in our life where the inner voice is coming, say we know there are 100 situations here, we know these 10 are positive. When I am prompted, okay, let's think, let's not act hastily. And there are 10 which I know are negative. So, if I know these 10 are positive, these 10 are negative, let's start with following the voice when I know it is positive or negative. And then this may be the grey zone for me right now. There are times when we don't know when something is coming from inside, is it right or is it wrong? But the idea is that to the extent we do what is right when we know what is right. We may say that I cannot do it fully, but at least I do as much as I can. To that extent, what we are doing is we are showing the divine that we want to choose wisely. And then gradually, the more we use the resource that has been given to us, the insight, the wisdom that is given to us, the more we will be given further wisdom. Just start with the outer. Avoid what we know is, all of us, if you go back after this talk, you could just go to your place where you are staying and just reflect, note down, say 3 activities that you know which are good for you. If you start doing them a little bit more, the quality of your life will improve. Note down 3 activities which, if you decrease them a little bit, again the quality of your life will improve, or at least the worsening of your quality of life will decrease. Now, we all can easily list those 3 activities, and you may not be able to change dramatically, but maybe you can do it a little bit more. So, we start with that, and gradually you will find that more and more clarity will come. More and more, not just clarity, but capacity will also come. Clarity means to know what is right and what is good, what is not so good. Capacity is also to act on what is good and do that. To know what to act on, to avoid doing that which is bad. So both, if we do what we can, then clarity and capacity, both will come. Shanai, Shanai, Krishna says, gradually, step by step. That is the method. The incremental method is always much more sustainable in self-transformation. Okay. So, thank you very much for your participation, very thoughtful questions, and I offer my best wishes that the Gita's wisdom can help you all on your journey to become more and more mindful and to make your life also more and more fruitful. Thank you.
Let us have a big round of applause for Chaitanya Charan sir. So we are very grateful that although you travel all over the world, today you are with us and given a good talk on mindfulness, and there was very interesting question and answers as well. So before we end and go for the dinner which is there, sir would do a small intro, a quick intro of the books and the calendar, New Year calendar that he has, and then we can discuss to go about.
Okay. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I have written about 27 books. I'll talk about 2 of the books which I have over here. So much of what I spoke today is from this book, 365 Reflections of our Daily Mindfulness based on the Bhagavad Gita. So this talks about how to resist temptations, how to grow through adversity, how to be less judgmental when dealing with people, how to be more sensitive, when we are cultivating good habits, how to avoid letting them become ritualistic, how to stay steady amidst life's ups and downs. So there are about 50-60 articles for each of these. The book is divided in 3 sections: nourish yourself, nourish your relationships, and nourish your devotion. So each article is just 1 page. You read in about 3-4 minutes, and there are some questions for reflection, and each article is based on 1 verse from the Bhagavad Gita. That way you can, so this is about how the Gita's wisdom can be applied practically in our life. I also have a website, the same gitadaily.com, where if you subscribe, you can get by email or Facebook or Insta, you can get WhatsApp also, you can get daily reflections on the Bhagavad Gita. And this is a calendar with 365 quotes inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. So some people, so if we can, some people say I just can't meditate. So if we can worry, we can meditate, because both worrying and meditating involve the same power, taking our thoughts away from our physical reality. So like that, there are many thought-provoking quotes which you may find helpful, and each of these is based on a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. And if you Google these quotes, again that will take you to the gitadaily.com where you can read the article. But even without that, this is a way to give you some spiritual substance for nourishing your intelligence, for anchoring yourself. So to keep small things small, keep big things big. Focus on keeping big things big. So like that, there are many different quotes. And so if any of you want, I can sign these also. There are a few other books on the Gita also which I have, which are a little bit more of the study of the Gita. So this is Bhagavad Gita Insights, 100 articles with diagrams, about 80 diagrams like the kind I was drawing, of course better drawn over there. So what exactly is karma? Is everything destined? Do we really have free will? Questions like this are answered in this. So this is a rational approach to the Gita, Bhagavad Gita Insights. And this also is a Gita study series. This is more of a relational approach. How the Gita is not just philosophy, but Gita is actually a revelation of divinity's love for humanity. And it's an invitation for a similar loving bond between humanity and divinity. So this approaches the Gita more from a relational perspective. So all these 4 books are available, and if you want all this, the whole set, that's also available at a discounted rate. Thank you very much.
Just as sir was saying about the Bhagavad Gita, so I would also like to tell that we, since past few years, have been successfully conducting few courses on the Gita. We do it offline or online. So basically we have 2 kinds of courses. One is Learn Gita in 6 days, wherein in 6 days we cover the 6 topics of Gita, and by studying this we get an entire overview of Gita. This is one type of thing we do. Apart from this, we also have Gita Study Circle. So wherein we actually open Gita, read sloka by sloka, everything in depth. So all this we conduct in a very close circle. That is when just 2 or 3 in a batch. And any question anybody has, it is then at the same time answered. So it's highly interactive and very interesting that way. So after the dinner above, maybe we will give you small forms. You can just write your thoughts, reflections, and any interest that you have. So thank you so much for being so patient, being attentive, and coming here today. And now we are ready to proceed from the staircase. So there are 2 staircases to go up. You can just proceed.